hit disproportionately by the effects of climate change, which they've done the least to cause, need to be represented properly in this mechanism. So it's a difficult bit of negotiation, but it is top of the list. And then on top of that, there's a couple of other things that must be negotiated. One of which is this $100 billion fund, which needs to flow from rich countries to less developed countries to help them to pay for mitigation and adaptation. And as we know, that is definitely not flowing at the moment. It's sort of staggering into agreement. And then there's an agreement about the global stocktake. So how often do all the nations do a stocktake of emissions? And the number that's been put out is every 5 years. Interestingly, the EU was opposed to this, but quite recently has said that they agree with the 5 years. So there's already been some movement. A lot of this negotiation has already happened, and this is about getting down to the real kind of chewy specifics and making the Paris Agreement actually work.
And Lucy, how does it work after COP? So in a sense, what I'm trying to get to, I guess, a more simple question will be: what power does COP have to enforce what has been decided in the next 2 weeks? What is going to be decided in Glasgow? So, for example, they put a price on carbon emissions in order to get companies to curb their carbon emissions, but they want to apply that to a factory in China. Well, how do they go about doing that? What powers do they have to get China to comply?
Yeah, well, I mean, this has always been the question with the COP mechanism. And when you sort of read into it, if you get into the deep on this, the language is really striking because it's so equivocal. To most people, it just seems like, well, that's not really strong enough. That's not enforceable enough. And this is one of the things that NGOs and campaigners, including the climate youth leaders who we see, represented by Greta Thunberg, are saying. It needs strong language. It needs strong commitment. And then on the other side, you would say, look, this mechanism has come a long way. And if you try and force countries who are not the biggest historical emitters, because that's the US, it's not China, into these positions, and you try and bully them in a sense, you will not get anywhere. So you actually see elements of the Paris Agreement celebrating the rich diversity of language within the mechanism, because that consensual approach is part of the mechanism. Has it worked so far? In a way, it has, because if you look pre-Paris, if you'd enforced the agreements from the Kyoto protocol, we were aiming for 3.6 degrees by the end of the century. Paris brought that down to 2.6 if it was enforced. And now we have to get to 2.1 degrees. And then we have to push it further so we get closer to 1.5. There is a lot of acknowledgement that this has to happen because of the urgency of the situation. So we're approaching catastrophic climate change, and we're going to go through these thresholds where we lose the opportunity to stabilize global temperatures. We've already seen what it looks like with 1.1 degrees of warming, which kind of tends to focus the mind, and terrible, terrible weather and some flooding around Glasgow at the moment, which may help to focus the minds even more strongly. So we don't have any option but to do this. It's been framed as code red for humanity by the UN Secretary General, for example. Meanwhile, there's another massive card that these negotiations hold, which other negotiations didn't, and that is the rapid transfer from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And we have seen the markets really act decisively in many, many cases. So these are, rather than a legal enforcement or tough language, these are maybe extenuating factors which will continue to be the reality long after COP26. So that also suggests that we have a better chance of success than we have at some previous climate negotiations. That would be the optimistic point of view. The less optimistic and the very critical point of view would say, it is pretty pathetic that we're still trying to implement elements of the Paris Agreement from 2015, and a lot of people are dismayed by the lack of focus. So there's really, really two sides to this, and we don't really know whether it's going to be a good COP or a bad COP.
What about the main characters? With all these get-togethers, there needs to be people sort of showing up, really, people who are going to be doing the wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, putting the right people together in the right rooms, putting enough pressure on the right people to get the results. Who do you think are going to be the big characters in the next couple of weeks?
Well, a lot of store has been set by the fact that President Xi Jinping is not going to be there representing China. But what's often missed is that there is a very, very experienced climate negotiator and a sort of veteran of these processes, Xi Jinping, who is a very, very senior political player in China who will be there and is considered to be a very, very important focus of this. Because as we all know, China has committed to not pursuing coal outside of China, but inside of China, coal expansion remains a real issue, sort of rampant and a real problem. So he will be a key figure that everyone will be trying to get in the room with. If you look at previous climate negotiations, depending on how rocky they get, you can sometimes get key figures come up seemingly out of nowhere. So we had the stateswoman Connie Hedegaard, I think her name is, who appeared to sort of rescue the Copenhagen talks in 2009. In 2014, we had the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, making several last ditch attempts to visit the conference and sort of bang people's heads together. So it depends what stage that gets to. But the central figures are not always who you think they are. We know, for example, John Kerry has been very, very active negotiating with China in the run-up. So it'll be interesting to see what is delivered there. I'm trying to think now if there's any other. I think, one of the other themes of COP26 is because there is this really big focus on this transfer of money, this international climate funding from rich nations to less developed countries. We have to listen to the people who are really on the front line of defending our climate. And that mainly includes indigenous communities, especially from the Amazon, and also the youth climate leaders, many of whom are extremely experienced in these negotiations and actually have to really fight to get a seat at the table. So we can also expect to see a lot of pressure exerted from those two constituencies.
Okay. Lucy, thank you so much. I'm sure we are going to be speaking again in the coming weeks, so I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Environmental journalist there, Lucy Siegel. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Chancellor's budget, but with a different spin on it. I was slightly amazed that there seemed to be a massive elephant in the room, and that was Brexit. It was mentioned, it was not mentioned at all in the speech, and yet the government's own Office of Budget Responsibility has reiterated that Brexit will have double the impact on the economy than was suffered by the pandemic. So why was it not part of the Chancellor's plans? Now, businesses have been saying for a while that they need extra help. So we're going to be speaking to a member of the cross-party UK Trade and Business Commission to see what help businesses are asking for and are they likely to get it. Mike's got in touch about the COP negotiations, says we're all in the same boat on global warming, but like the Titanic, some countries are travelling steerage with no access to lifeboats. Good metaphor there, Mike. Thank you for getting in touch. Keep giving your thoughts on Halloween. Are you going to be one of those people who's excitedly going to be opening the door and throwing sweets at all the adorable children in front of you? Or, like me, are you going to draw the curtains and pretend that no one is home? And how have we got to the place where we've got this Americanized, sweet-infested, plastic tat everywhere celebration of Halloween? Or am I just being a curmudgeon? 87222, start your message with the word Times. You could tweet us at Times Radio. It's 2:20. You're listening to Alexis Conran here on Times Radio in association with Charlie Biggums.
Times Radio.
I'm Aisha Hazarika. Join me this afternoon from 4 o'clock on Times Radio. We'll be taking a look back at the week in politics and current affairs. We'll also be looking ahead at the big stories coming up. We'll be doing it with lots of well-informed opinion and a bit of wit and wisdom.
Aisha Hazarika. This afternoon from 4 on Times Radio.
Alexis Conran on Times Radio with Charlie Biggums. Explore the full range of delicious meals at biggums.com and find Charlie Biggums in your local supermarket.
Full Fact will be here in a moment or two with the latest fact checks of the week. And before 3 o'clock, we're going to be finding out how we got to the stage of the Halloween that we have at the moment. How did we get from Hallows Eve to this Americanized sugar-infested plastic tat celebration that we have at the moment? So all that to come. But before that, many businesses have been warning the government about the damage being caused by Brexit. They've been saying that this government, they've been saying that to this government for the past 6 months. But now the OBR has supported what businesses have been saying, and they are calling on the government to implement policies to limit the damage caused by Brexit. They've estimated that Brexit is going to cause twice the damage that the pandemic has caused to the economy so far. Now, of course, they're not calling for Brexit to be reversed or a fresh referendum or anything like that. They're just calling for help for businesses. I'm joined now by Tamara Gingic, member of the Cross-Party UK Trade Business Commission and CEO and founder of the Fashion Roundtable. Tamara, good afternoon. Thanks for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Alexis.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the UK Trade and Business Commission are saying at the moment?
What we're saying is that there's a lot more support and engagement on the issues around Brexit and the consequences that that is having on business and trade that needs to be understood by the government and then implemented. We've engaged with a number of witnesses over 13 sessions, over 17 witnesses, and we've had 24 hours plus of oral testimony and much more in written evidence. And really what we're hearing again and again from a real cross range of industry, from farming, from manufacturing, and from the creative industries and many others, is that the impacts actually seem to replicate themselves again and again. So much of the evidence that we're coming in it might be from different sectors, but the same issues are repeating themselves.
So what are the main issues that are coming up in all the evidence that you have been going through?
I would say what really interested me, not coming from farming, was the consequences of the Australia trade deal and the impacts that will have on UK farmers. That I really, really learned a lot about, because that's not a sector that I've got massive experience in. I'm from the fashion industry. The issues that face the fashion industry, the increase in red tape, the real confusion when they try to get money from the Brexit support fund, and the lack of real help to get £2,000. It just wasn't incentivised or supported. I spoke to people that were spending hours on the phone with consultants from government who just didn't understand the issues facing them. The red tape for every industry that we've spoken to, including my own, has felt overwhelming and not supported, and a lack of real support to get people in professional industries, whether that's music, fashion or other creative industries, as well as other professions in and out of the UK now that the COVID restrictions are lifting, has been a repeated theme, not just from my own sector, but from others as well.
Tell us a little bit about your own sector, which is the fashion industry. What problems are you experiencing and how can they be solved?
Massive red tape, Alexis, and that wasn't the issues. Obviously, you spoke about the 2% loss to GDP from COVID. The industry really was very clever and agile in moving to online sales, and the largest part of that, 50% of our businesses, has been with the EU traditionally. Obviously they're closer as well, so in the build up to COP26 and thinking about the climate crisis and emissions, do we really want to have greater trade with countries that are further away? And before Brexit, that was definitely our largest trading partner. And now people are losing business left, right and centre because they're not within the EU, and it's just too hard for people to get things. There's been real anger coming from customers if they're getting impacted with unexpected costs. Shipping was just so confusing. I spoke to Catherine Hamnett, who was being told very early on after we'd left the EU that she couldn't send wool. In fact, she could, but her Korea didn't understand because it was just so difficult for them to get to grips with red tape. It all needs to be much more fluid and to understand none of these people are the enemy. Our trading partners are not the enemy. They're our allies in business. And I think that view needs to be, at the heart of any kind of reduction of red tape. Nobody likes to deal with red tape. We've had a generation of having a very ease of movement of goods and services to the EU. And suddenly barriers are going up. And like any business, you go towards what's more easy. And if it's easier for you to trade within Schengen, that's what's going to happen.
What do you think when you hear that people say, well, look, these are all teething problems? Of course, when you've had 40 years of doing business one way and you're going to change it, there are going to be bumps on the road, that all these things were to be expected and they're going to sort themselves out.
I think that's a very valid comment, Alexis. But I would say when we're looking at the skills shortages that we've seen, such as the garment workers, unfortunately, this government and the party that it's from has been in government for 11 years. And that means that they had what's called a STEM education agenda. And they took art and design out of the core curriculum for state schools, which is 93% of us. Mm-hmm. And that means that we don't have the skills to become the garment workers. So in my industry, we've now got a massive loss of garment workers who are largely from the EU, from Eastern Europe. And we haven't created the talent supply chain from domicile workers, which is what I've been asking for. And this has been escalated by an education agenda that's been in operation for 11 years. But the T levels, which would support local talent being trained in those skills, is not being rolled out till September 23. Now, surely you would align your education agenda with the skills shortage for when you leave the EU. That would have been the first step. So I think you can't really call that teething problems. That's a lack of organisational strategy from a top level.
And what about red tape and the ability to do trade? I mean, these things, in your view, can they be sorted out by digitising a lot of the form filling, which is a complaint that I've heard from many traders? Of course, it is going to be more expensive, whether you digitise it or not, but actually make it less of a nightmare to do trade with countries in the EU.
100%. Look, most business, my industry, the fashion industry, and most business in the UK are SMEs. They just don't have the time and they don't have the experts in place to support all these extra pieces of paperwork. So digitise it, make it really simple, make it idiot-proof for people so that it's not a hassle, it's not half of their day. They're not ringing me up in hysterics about it. They're not... that they're able to do business and actually grow their businesses and support that. And I think after COVID, every business deserves that level of support and understanding from the government.
Tamara, do you think that there are going to be opportunities down the road? I mean, this whole exercise of Brexit, it's gone now, it's happened, we're there, we are where we are. Are there opportunities on the horizon? I mean, a lot of Brexit supporters have said, well, look, there are going to be new opportunities to trade with other parts of the world that we couldn't before. In your view, from your expertise around the fashion industry, does that hold true?
The only way, and this is me speaking, the only way that would be at all palatable would if we had a US free trade deal, and I don't think that's on the cards. I think where the UK can be a real innovator, and I'm thinking of COP26 here, is there are so much talent across so many of these industries that are leading in sustainable innovation. And I think that is where, as a country of critical creative thinkers, we do really excel. And combining that with tech innovation, I think that's where the UK could be a fantastic innovative hub. Just outside of the EU, but a real partner to it. And that would be the way that I hope that this is played out. But I think that if you're looking at trade deals with countries on the other side of the world, where there are smaller demographics with less money and less money to spend on our exports, then I think that it's highly unlikely that we could match what we had with the EU. And that's not me being a Ramona. That's me being realistic about economics and how trade works.
Okay. Tamara, thank you so much for giving me your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Take care.
Tamara Gingic, she's the member of a cross-party UK Trade and Business Commission group, CEO and founder of Fashion Roundtable. Their press release, cross-party of MPs and business leaders published fixes to broken Brexit deal. You can get to that press release and their report on tradeandbusiness.uk. Part of the polling they've done, and it's actually similar to polling in the Observer today, which is you can find that on page 2, is that 53% of people think the government's Brexit deal has created more problems than it has solved, with just 15% thinking it has done the opposite. Let me give you some of the numbers from the Observer as well. This is an opinion poll from the Observer. Is Brexit having a generally good or bad impact? In